Hello everyone, welcome to Women Lead, a production of the Women of Color Empowerment Institute, Inc. We are your host. I am Bernadette Norris Weeks.
And I'm Kathy Eggleston, and we have a great show planned for you today. Black-owned businesses have been hit especially hard by the coronavirus pandemic for so many reasons, which include weaker ties to banks, limited reach of federal aid programs, and the fact that the health crisis has disproportionately impacted the Black community. Bernadette, we must have a conversation about economic empowerment.
You're right, Kathy. And a leading voice on this topic is our guest today, Maggie Anderson. She is a lawyer, MBA graduate, and Congressman John Lewis's former aide. She is a successful corporate executive and one who knows a lot about this topic. She lived her public pledge to only purchase from Black-owned businesses for an entire year. Now, Maggie wrote a book about it, and her experience she is now calling the Empowerment Experiment.
Wow. So, of course, we do these huge women's empowerment conferences, and Maggie has been a guest, and C-SPAN actually covered us when Maggie was one of our guests. And for me, her talk was eye-opening because I did not know that the dollar circulates less in the Black community than in any other community before leaving the community. For instance, the dollar circulates 28 days in the Asian American community, 19 days in the Jewish American community, and 6 hours in the Black community. And when you consider that only 2 to 3% of Black dollars are spent with Black businesses, well, it's no wonder why these other groups have lower incarceration rates, lower unemployment rates, and higher household incomes. In fact, Maggie's experiment was studied by Northwestern University's Kellogg School, and they found that if middle-class families making $75,000 spent just 10% with Black-owned businesses, we would create, listen, Bernadette, 1 million jobs.
1 million jobs.
What do you think about that?
Well, let's have this conversation. And today, Kathy, I really want to dig down a little bit lower than what we normally hear when we are talking about this topic, even to one another, other people of color. And in digging down lower, what do we hear? We hear things about, well, the service isn't the same. And if you go to Black-owned businesses, you're not going to get good service. That is ridiculous. How many of us go to all kinds of businesses and maybe it doesn't, it takes a little bit longer. Maybe all places are short-staffed sometimes. Maybe all places, maybe the waitress may be having a bad day. Whatever the case is, I think that for Black-owned businesses, I think that we as Black people, people of color, have unreasonably high expectations, which really feeds into this narrative of something being wrong. And when the reality is, a lot of times we may not want to drive that extra 2 or 3 miles to go to that Black-owned businesses because, let's face it, many people are not living in the same houses that our mothers or our grandparents lived in. Mm-hmm. And so as we were able to come along and do a little bit better in terms of economically through our jobs and things like that, we've moved out of these Black communities. And so to drive back to, unless you're at church or something like that, maybe once a week on a Sunday, to drive back is just something some people feel like they just don't want to spend that extra time doing.
Right. And we've fought for these opportunities and we appreciate these opportunities, but we have to have an awareness that when we leave these communities and leave these Black business main streets, we're leaving them stranded.
That is true, Kathy. And that's the deep conversation that we want to hear about today from Maggie. And I really can't wait to hear what she has to say about even the historical aspects of it. I know she's going to talk a little bit about Dr. King, some of the things that he stood for in terms of economic empowerment. I know we're going to hear, some of those interesting things that we don't think about every day. I mean, we see many times the vacant buildings and the fact that it doesn't seem as supported in some of these communities. And so I think Maggie's going to give us a deeper reach into why that is the case.
I think so too. And the other thing that Maggie does is tell us how we can make a difference. We'll be right back with Maggie Anderson.
At the Women of Color Empowerment Institute, our mission is to enhance and expand leadership by women of color. We do this in a variety of different ways, including but not limited to providing mentorship opportunities for young professionals where we assist in helping to create paths to leadership. We empower women to develop capacities for social change. We produce programs that promote heritage awareness, and we provide training opportunities for business and government. Our institute holds seminars focused on professional success techniques, and we host many other events such as our popular Advocates for Change and Leaders Connect. The Women of Color Empowerment Institute publishes a magazine called Women Lead. Our signature event is the Women of Color Empowerment Conference, a yearly conference where hundreds of leaders gather from all across the United States and beyond. To learn more about membership and how you can support our programs or be a sponsor of the Women Lead TV, visit us at nationalwomenofcolor.com. Again, that's nationalwomenofcolor.com.
Today is about all of us. Remember today those Black people who died in fields and factories and farms, working and slaving for others, and in so doing, building up other families' riches and businesses that still exist today. Businesses that our community need and is entitled to. Remember those thousands of entrepreneurs who were lynched and raped and shot at and jailed for daring to do what business owners I support try to do, what I ask our young people to do, what some of you do, what Bernadette and Jackie do, and that's just set up shop, offer the community a quality good or service, and expect to be valued and supported. Take some time to imagine that they have their homes and thriving economic thoroughfares torched to the ground, looted because business owners and consumers alike had to be reminded violently and unambiguously that they did not have the right of entrepreneurship, to have a self-sustained community. Today, let's honor those torched towns too. Let's go home and tell our children about those towns. Let's think about them later tonight and later this week when you consider whether it's worth it to pay a little more, or look a little harder, or drive a little farther to support the great Black businesses we do still have.
We're back with Maggie Anderson. Hi, Maggie.
Hi, Maggie.
Hi, Bernadette. Hi, Kathy.
Maggie, you look amazing.
Oh, thanks so much. Thank you. Thanks for having me today.
Maggie, you are one of the Women of Color Empowerment Institute's favorite speakers, and you know that we've had you a lot. Now, for those who may not be familiar with you, tell us about your book called Our Black Year, One Family's Quest to Buy Black in America's Racially Divided Economy, and what inspired you to write about your experience?
I conceived of and conducted the empowerment experiment and wrote about it in my book, Our Black Year, because I wanted to do something, actually do something, not just say something, hashtag something, do something about economic injustice in America. This was before Trump, before George Floyd's murder. We took that stand. We did it to prove our love publicly for our hurting community. And we were just so inspired by the election of our first Black president, hoping that the newfound unity and hope would translate into economic power too. That's why we did it. We did it for love, we did it for pride, and we did it to take a stand. And we also did it, and this is why I wrote the book. We did it to study and showcase how supporting Black-owned businesses can counter poverty, crime, and all those social crises that disproportionately impact Black people. We wanted to prove that Black businesses make this country great. But before the empowerment experiment, it's not like we were doing that much for our community. We were active in the Black church. Johnson mentored 100 Black men. We voted Black. We hurt when Black people got shot. We got happy when Black folks were nominated for awards and the Black coach made it to the Super Bowl. We were teaching our daughters to love themselves, their God, their neighbor, their country, and their skin. We were Black, just not buying Black. Just like so many, like most proud Black people. We were members of the right groups. We donated to the right charities. And I think I was inspired by something that Dr. King said. He said, philanthropy is commendable, but it must not cause the philanthropist to overlook the circumstances of economic injustice which make philanthropy necessary. So I got tired of that. I decided I'm not overlooking anymore, playing dumb and living the easy and empty life. I'm blaming everybody else for the Black community's problems, but can't remember the last time I engaged a Black business owner. Can't name one local Black-owned business or bank. Not anymore. So I did that year because I needed to do something to honor the unsung business owners that funded, fueled, and facilitated the movement. They're the ones who did that for me. And what have I ever done for them? I needed to do something. Because nothing changes in the Black community without struggle, activism, and protest. Equality is our right, but empowerment must be earned. So that's why I did that year. I did that year also, and most importantly, to inspire you, Bernadette, and folks just like you. We're the same. I wanted to show you that we can win. I wanted to document it. I wanted to prove it with that study and put it in that book and memorialize it in the Empowerment Experiment Foundation. We can win. We can win. That should be the new name of our Black Year. We can win.
Maggie, given the pandemic and where we are now, I can only assume that things have gotten a little bit worse. But what are you seeing as you travel around the country right now?
Well, I haven't been doing a lot of traveling. I haven't given a speech or a lecture in public since almost a year ago. But 2020, the pandemic, and George Floyd's murder did shine a light on the rule and resurgence of racism in America. It opened eyes and made people more open to and sympathetic to this justice and empowerment message. So 10 years ago, you couldn't even say buy Black. It was taboo. You would never see large mainstream corporations actually proclaiming their support for and investing in Black-owned businesses. So there's an opportunity here, finally, for the Buy Black movement to advance. But as this pandemic rages on, our businesses are suffering disproportionately, just like with everything else. And now I know we're all scared. We're worried about all this racism, this pandemic, and how it disproportionately hurts the Black community. I am too. And just like you, I like to protect myself and my family and my neighbors in this pandemic. So I use hand sanitizer. But to empower my community, I use Safeisha hand sanitizer. Safeisha. I don't even have to tell you. Now y'all know that's Black owned. My point is, our being in a pandemic does not mean we press pause on the fight against racism, or that our commitment to economic equality can wait a little bit. We have to do all of it all the time.
You explained in your book how before you finished your year of buying, how many of the businesses that you were supporting actually went out of business. Is there a theme for why you think that took place? Or in other words, what seems to be a common impediment to sustaining Black businesses?
That's easy. Lack of demand. Of course, racism and discrimination are still at the center of what ails Black entrepreneurial success. Access to capital and opportunity, that we start off so behind. So many young Arab American kids, Indian American kids, Chinese American, Korean American kids, Greeks, and all other kinds of ethnic Europeans have entrepreneurship in their family. They grow up in the entrepreneurial spirit. We don't have that anymore. We've lost that. And our talented tenthers are still just trying to get good jobs instead of opening and passing down businesses. Many of the Black folks who own businesses now are forced into entrepreneurship because of lack of educational opportunity, can't find any other employment, and just don't have the requisite training and networks to be successful, to get into big retailers with their products, to get investors and clients, to get big corporate and government contracts. We don't get any of that. It's hard to do that for anyone, but especially for Black folks. But if we were investing in Black-owned businesses, in venture capital firms, real estate funds, and Black banks. The banks that give our folks business loans and the VC firms that invest in Black businesses, they could be helping our businesses out. We can fight all of these problems. If we're to make sure all of our professionals and contractors, lawyers like you, Bernadette, were Black, their businesses would grow. Most Black professionals are struggling to get their own folks to support them. If we were to go out of our way to support the wonderful businesses we do have in the community, they would be successful, they would grow, they would be more attractive to investment in large-scale contracts. But it starts with us. We are not doing any of these things. We have to make our businesses shine. We have to grow Black-owned businesses. We have to make these investments, these small sacrifices and changes. There's no way Black businesses can succeed when Black people only spend 2 to 3% of their money with them.
Maggie, I'm a lover of history, and I think that history has a way of repeating itself, especially if we don't pay attention to what's happening around us. And while everyone wants to move on and forget about the history and not really talk about the things that we're talking about right now, and I want to move on too, but as you often talk as you're in your travels about the fact that over 90% of the lynchings that took place after Reconstruction and during the Jim Crow years was really economic terrorism, I really want you to talk about that a little bit more and educate our viewers on what you've learned over the years.
Girl, you know I'm a fan of history too, especially Black business history. After emancipation, actually even before emancipation, Blacks had amassed great business power. In the Black community, we built schools and churches and banks and insurance companies, grocery stores, hotel chains, drug stores, department stores, hardware stores, hospital systems. We had whole farming regions, stock brokerages. All of our shops and professionals thrived, all Black owned. In the early 1900s, Black entrepreneurship was actually at its peak. King grew up studying and admiring W.B. Du Bois and Carter G. Woodson and Booker T. Washington, titans of industry. He was studying business and reading books like Negro in Business when he was at Morehouse. He had planning meetings in A.G. Gaston's hotels in Birmingham. He hung out with Cyril McSween, who owned several McDonald's restaurants and served as the treasurer of the SCLC, and put his own money and the group's money into Black-owned banks. A grocery store owner and another person who was the owner of a large printing company, they created the first branch of the NAACP in Mississippi. They funded our fight for the vote there. They registered hundreds of voters. This is the kind of stuff that King saw growing up. Business owners fueling and funding and facilitating the movement. When they called that meeting, within hours of Rosa Parks' arrest, the business owners showed up. Lawyers, pharmacists, grocers, barbers, and bankers, publishers, Black union leaders came to offer their financial support. And then when they needed it, the Black-owned taxi companies stepped up and the service station owners came. And during the boycott, when the marchers lost their jobs and the businesses were burned down and taxi drivers were jailed for giving rides to the boycotters and the marchers, when the business leaders were lynched for leading the movement, the Black banks stepped in. The Black funeral homes stepped in. They built war chests for the lawsuits, the protests, to keep the attacked businesses afloat and to cover the lost wages and to cover all the death and destruction from the terrorism of the racists. Dr. King wasn't just hoping for and hollering about a $10,000 sponsorship from GM or GE to pay the cost for the movement, to pave the way for freedom. The civil rights movement wasn't brought to you by, okay? When they bombed the churches, the businesses were there. When they hanged Black men, the businesses were there. When they raped the sisters, the businesses were there. When they enacted a new racist law, when they denied another dream to our kids or dismissed another death, the businesses were there. Then their hatred of our ascendants was ultimately matched by our hunger for acceptance. And this is the part of history that I'm scared of repeating. King saw this too. King started to fear that our civil rights victories might have come at the expense of our business and economic ones, and his fears were warranted. After the bus boycott, after the March on Washington, after the Civil Rights Act, after integration, after all of that horror and violence, when that stuff started to dissipate, so did our economic solidarity. We were losing our economic fight and our economic might. That's why in his mountaintop speech that he delivered the day before he was murdered, he pivoted in the last half of that speech for a call to action. He wanted us to unite for economic justice and empowerment, not just for civil rights. He talked about collective buying power and doing an economic withdrawal from businesses that were treating Black employees badly and mistreating Black customers. And not just that, King specifically fought for Black-owned businesses, not just for the right to go to segregated white-owned businesses. This is what King said, too, in that speech. But you don't see this on TV or hear it on the radio or see it in the history books. He said, "We've got to strengthen Black institutions. I call upon you to take your money out of the banks downtown and deposit your money into Tri-State Bank. We want a bank-in movement in Memphis. We're just telling you to do what we're doing. Put your money there." King said, put your money there. But we didn't. Instead, in those 2 decades after Dr. King's murder, it became fashionable to abandon our banks and businesses, to show and prove that we're good enough to go to white businesses that denied us in the past. Within 20 years after we lost King, 85% of our over 120 Black-owned banks disappeared. This is our history too, and I hope that we don't repeat it. We couldn't win then without the businesses, and we can't win now without strong Black-owned businesses.
The law office of Austin, Pammies, Norris, Weeks, Powell is a full-service law firm practicing in the area of governmental law, including the representation of municipalities, civil litigation, personal injury, real estate, and corporate transactional matters. With over 100 years of collective experience, our attorneys are admitted to practice before state courts, federal courts, and the United States Supreme Court. We are conveniently located in downtown Fort Lauderdale and can be reached at 954-768-9770. Or for more information about the law firm of Austin, Pammies, Norris, Weeks, Powell, visit our website at apnwlaw.com. That's apnwlaw.com.
And we are back. We are joined by Carmen Miller, the owner, president, and CEO of McKinley Financial Services, to continue our conversation about Black-owned businesses. Now, she's a 35-year veteran in the insurance agency, what she calls originally an accidental job, but today she is one of our preeminent Black-owned insurance agencies in the U.S. Now, we want to welcome Carmen Miller. Thanks for coming on the program, Carmen.
Thank you, Kathy.
Alrighty, the first thing I have to ask you is, what is the difference between an insurance company and an insurance agency? I did not know.
An insurance company is the overall insurer. As an agency, we place the insurance. So as an agency, we can work with many companies. So it's good to know that we're not looking or captive with one insurance company. We can look around and shop at various companies.
Tell me a little bit about McKinley as a Black-owned insurance agency. You know, how are you alike? How are you different?
We are a full-service agency. It doesn't matter if you want homeowners insurance for your personal car insurance, or as an employer, employee benefits. And then we have captured a niche market of student and sports. So we can do all types of insurance for any industry.
The world has been in a health crisis. People have lost their jobs. What would you say to people about the conversation about insurance that they should be having?
It's have it now rather than later. And I say that because so many people were unprepared
and still are, basically, for life, death, and living. When we talk about insurance, most people look at their home or their car because of those are the things that are required. But when you think about health insurance and disability insurance, those are not things that people think of first. That's almost the last thing they think of. But to be prepared makes all the difference in the world for everybody concerned.
I have to ask you about your own personal journey to the position that you now occupy over 35 years.
It was an accidental job. They left me in the office. I was the secretary. They left me in the office alone, and I sold 11 policies in one day.
Wow.
Yeah, it was like I said, accident. And from there, I just progressed. I became an employee benefit specialist, which originally I had no clue. But I learned, and I was willing to learn, and I was willing to take the risks that were necessary to progress. I came to McKinley Financial Services 18 years ago as an employee. And with that, I just continued to grow, to listen, to learn, and be bold enough to take the steps that when the opportunity rose for me to purchase the company, I did it.
For others in our audience who are looking at their own leadership journey, what advice would you give them?
Sometimes I just had to make a decision on my own without going to an owner or a manager to get permission. It was risky, and I just did it.
And so far, it's paying off.
It's working.
For
it's
you
working.
And for your customers. That's
Absolutely.
why you're here. We hear nothing but great things about McKinley Financial Services.
Yeah. The company has been around for over 35 years, has always had an emphasis on service to the clients, service to our community, and we continue that.
Carmen Miller, thank you so very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Kathy.
It is clear that we must focus on economic empowerment and not just political empowerment. Black people have a lot of buying potential as a group, and we hope that you've been empowered here today.
Thank you for tuning in to Women Lead, and until we meet, be empowered.